Yes, exactly. That's Dan's job, right? But he keeps reminding me he's not the stylist. He's the producer. He's not the stylist. Well, Nikhita, thank you so much for coming on today, the People Making Payments podcast. We're absolutely thrilled to have you on. And before we get into it, let's say that you're meeting someone at a party for the first time. How do you explain what it is that you do?
So firstly, thank you for having me on here, Shona. It's great to be here. So how do I describe what I do at a party? I basically tell people that I stop the bad guys from stealing money on the internet. And then I see people's eyes either glaze over or light up.
Yeah. I get real like kind of caped crusader kind of vibes from that. I'd be excited if I met someone.
Yeah. So I've tried out different things. Like I work in tech. That tends to, at a party, people's eyes glaze over. Yeah. So this is a little bit more interesting. And then I explain that when you buy something online, there is this invisible layer that checks whether the transaction is genuine or fraudulent. And that invisible layer is Signifyd. And that is what the company I work for does. And my role in that, we are a global company and I head up the EMEA part of the business.
Brilliant. And so you're sort of the invisible superhero, keeping everyone safe behind the scenes.
I think there are definitely people in the company who are the invisible superheroes.
Oh, yeah. Amazing. Brilliant. So I want to, like, having had the opportunity to bring you on, like, I want to talk all things fraud. How would you define it in today's world?
So fraud in commerce is essentially someone using stolen or false identities to purchase things that aren't theirs. And there is the kind of obvious one, which is stolen card details to make purchases online, but it's evolved. You have things like account takeover, where someone uses your logins, steals your logins and uses your stored card data to buy things. You have synthetic identities, where you have fraudsters creating identities over a period of time that they then use to make fraudulent purchases. And then you have first-party fraud or misuse or abuse, which is when your genuine customers are abusing policies like with refunds or chargebacks. The lines get very blurred, and that makes it super interesting.
Yeah, and that sometimes gets called friendly fraud, right? Yes. Which I think is a horrible term. Yeah, because I don't think there's anything friendly about fraud in any sense.
No, there is nothing friendly about it. I think businesses do need to treat those type of fraud or abuse, as it's referred to in the industry, differently to an organised fraud ring, because you may have loyal customers who are pushing it to see how they can take advantage of policies, and they shouldn't be, and they should be stopped from doing that. But it's not the same as an organised fraud ring. You could have had a customer that spent thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds with you, and they are returning an item that they wore that has a mark on it that they're trying to return. You need to handle that differently to someone who is stealing card data and trying to buy a load of stuff from your website.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about sort of like segmenting the fraud, if you like, thinking about the broader relationship you have with that customer, treating it differently to those who are kind of the out and out bad guys.
Exactly. So one example is with returns fraud and refund abuse. You have examples of where customers will send like I said, like a damaged or worn item, or they might send back something that is not the item that they received. In that case, you might want to create friction in the returns process. So instead of them being able to return it online, you might say that they need to return it in store. So it's finding those different ways of dealing with those types of abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like the returns fraud has probably been around for a long time, but probably I guess the volume of it taking place is bigger now with sort of like this sort of like fast fashion, or the ability to sort of like with e-commerce, right, to sort of have the sort of easier access to buying a lot of stuff essentially. So it's but it's not necessarily like a new type of fraud, right? Maybe it's just proliferating.
It's exactly this. Returns abuse has always been there. The behaviour of returning items has always been around. The reason that it's more prevalent now is, as you said, with fast fashion. So retailers, merchants, they're encouraging their customers to buy more items, and they're making it easy to return items. Myself, for example, I will buy every single dress in every single color that I want to online rather than going to a store, because one, they won't have it in the store. Two, they might not have it in the right sizes, etc. So I'll buy it all online, and then I'll return the things that I don't want, because it's so easy to return things. The ease of buying things online, the ease of returning things online has resulted in an increase in this returns abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned about distinguishing between different types of fraud versus abuse, etc. And you mentioned synthetic identities, which sounds very futuristic and quite intriguing. Tell us more about that.
So the fraud landscape is constantly evolving. Fraud as a service is a tool that exists. Fraudsters are organized fraud rings. It's not one person who's chancing it. These are organizations. These are businesses. They have customer service for their users. It's a big thing. So synthetic identities, you have these businesses that are creating accounts, building them up, putting some genuine transactions in there, creating this identity that on paper looks like it's legit and it's genuine and it's a good shopper, to try and mislead retailers and that invisible layer into thinking that this is legit.
Wow. Okay. So that's quite scary, right? If you're a merchant or a retailer, it sounds like it's really stacked against you in terms of actually figuring out that they are fraudsters in the first place, because they're so legitimate, right? They're set up like companies. They have everything. How do merchants go about tackling that? I mean, you're kind of up against quite a big organization there.
Yeah. So and you are. And that's why it's so important, that invisible layer that we were talking about. It's so important to have that, to be aware of it, to utilize a good, strong fraud prevention tool, to work with a partner. And I think we'll probably talk about this in a bit more detail, but how is AI impacting this? I mean, it's essentially an arms race, right? It's the fraudsters are using AI, the fraud prevention providers are using AI. Ultimately, to prevent these sort of issues, it's all about data. We have data. We have machine learning AI models that identify. It's all about identity and intent when you look at this data. Who is this person and what is their intention? And when you connect the dots, there would be things in here that the age of the account, this as a very, very minimum, the age of the account connected to the IP address, connected to a fraudulent purchase that they might have made on the other side of the world, connected to these genuine transactions. If you connect all those dots with your models, with your machine learning, with your data, then that's how you can truly build that full picture of the identity. Who is this person and what is their intention? Is this a legitimate person that wants to make a legitimate purchase, or is this a fraudster?
Yeah, and because they are so sophisticated, the fraudsters, it's almost like you can't expect to rely on human judgment alone to be able to make that call right. It's, what you're talking about there is such a vast number of variables that are being looked at in relationship to each other to kind of, like you said, using machine learning to actually be able to flag potential fraud taking place. And what a great application of AI, right?
It really, really is. And the use, so we have all this data. We also have a huge team of data scientists who build our models. The models that are built, the decisions that they can make, it is not possible for a human to make that decision. It is just not physically possible. And that is the real power of AI, of machine learning, and the data. But you could get all this data, and that it's super crucial to have the right team to be able to build the models. Because you hear about payment providers, for example, who have their own in-house fraud prevention tool because they see data. They don't have the same level of data scientists that a company just focusing on fraud prevention have.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's sort of like the resources that you can put to this, the expertise. And I imagine, as you talk, talked about, like the fraud landscape is evolving, right? So having that expertise in fraud and understanding where the next big trends of fraud are coming from as well, to, like, I guess, anticipate and build things, for in anticipation of that. But I mean, it must be, you talk about, AI being an arms race. The fraudsters who are using AI, they don't have to play by the same rules, right? They don't have the same compliance requirements. They don't have the same safeguarding requirements. So, like, what does it look like as a really sort of like AI forward company like Signifyd, who's sort of tackling in this space? How do you go about actually kind of keeping pace with the rate, sophistication of these fraudsters?
So at Signifyd, we never become complacent. And we were the first in this space to identify this gap, this requirement for data, for machine learning. We have built our entire business on using data, machine learning, AI from when we were founded in order to do exactly this, constantly evolving, constantly changing. We were the first in market to do this. And this is the entire principle on which we were built. Using data, using machine learning and AI to be one step, constantly, at least one step ahead of the fraudsters.
That's brilliant. And so I suppose, it's that sort of first mover advantage, right? You say, like, as you said, like you saw the gap in the market, you could see where the landscape was going, and actually anticipating that built a business that actually could solve that problem.
Exactly. Before us, it was rules. Static rules, sometimes changing rules, maybe a little bit of machine learning with these rules. Some of these rules were based on data, but they were rules, not on models, not automated, accurate decisions made in milliseconds.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned earlier, a big part of that is the team behind it, is our data scientists, is our risk intelligence teams, because there are things that our models need in order to become even more accurate. And some of those trends, some of the things that we see are policy abuse, are different types of abuse that we see and our teams see, and they're constantly tweaking our models, making changes, building new models in order to make those accurate decisions.
And absolutely fascinating that the speed of change is seconds, minutes, days, rather than weeks or months, right? So, for example, like if you think about, because we look a lot, obviously, at AI within the sort of the broader sort of commerce and payments industry, right? And we know it's moving fast, right? We know that, for example, product development cycles, proposition development, it's being written and rewritten, in the course of, let's say, weeks. But it sounds like from the sort of like the fraud use case in particular, that's you're shrinking that from like weeks to like literally down to
exactly
real time.
Exactly. That's the beauty of machine learning, of AI. Like we do change things straight away. Our models are built to adjust straight away. And it's really cool. I think my background before Signifyd was in payments. And moving to a company that is focused purely on fraud and abuse prevention, and being able to see the things that our team have built. And it's also the first time that since I've been at Signifyd, that I've really got to know our data scientists and our risk intelligence analysts and understood it. I mean, to me, they're like magicians. Mm-hmm. The things that they build. The things that they do, the knowledge that they have, it is incredible.
Yeah. Well, and this is the People Making Payments podcast, and all about the people that make up the industries of payments or adjacent industries, sort of in the fraud and commerce space. And it's brilliant to be able to celebrate sort of the talent that we have in the industry who are working really, really hard to kind of make it a better and safer place for everybody to do business, for sure.
Yes, I'm in awe of the people in the company.
Yeah. So you mentioned a moment ago something really interesting, which was sort of the network effect or the network benefits of how you tackle fraud. Talk about that a little bit more, because that really sounds interesting.
Yes, absolutely. So this also connects to the fact that we are able to make changes immediately. So we could see a fraud attack happening on one merchant somewhere in the world, and we would, one, immediately stop that fraud attack, and two, whatever is the underlying cause of that, immediately deploy that across our entire network, so those fraudsters don't attack any of our other customers, any of our other merchants, or any businesses in our network.
Interesting. And I suppose that, for payment providers, they, if they're trying to tackle fraud or abuse single-handedly, they might not necessarily have that level of visibility over all the data, right? They see their portion of what's happening and not sort of the bigger picture.
Exactly. They see the data from their customers. We see data from across our customers, across our network, which includes our partners. And so we see significantly more data, and we are fully equipped to connect those dots because of the strong team that we have behind us of data scientists, of risk analysts, and the models that we've created.
Yeah, and it almost sounds like, so it's almost, if we think about the collaborative effort that it takes to really combat fraud, because if you're able to see data of where a merchant has been potentially defrauded, and you're able to use that to sort of like save another merchant from kind of falling foul of the same thing, it's like it creates, I guess, that powerful effect of having more of a defense. We're kind of safer in numbers, if you like, than versus
absolutely. That's why businesses choose Signifyd, that's why businesses want to work with us, because they know that it's not just one size fits all. The same way it's not one size fits all, because it's not just your customers and we just apply rules based on your customers. We will apply rules based on our network. Something we're seeing here that could impact you will not impact you negatively, because we will stop it before it comes to you. One. Two, the other thing is one size fits all. That again does not apply from a global standpoint. And yes, we're talking US is different to Europe, but in Europe we have many different countries with different fraud landscapes and different abuse landscapes, and it's really, really important to be aware and to have those different nuances in your solution, whether you're a global merchant or whether you are a global solution provider. Being able to make those being able to make those differences between the regions is also crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, definitely something that we see at KE, like when we look at sort of either merchants or payment service providers who are expanding internationally, each market is so unique. So like, payments and commerce, like, yes, it's global, but it's also quite local as well at the same time. And actually being able to, especially like from a fraud perspective, sort of have a sense of global protection that can then be sort of like really localized to the market nuances that you're entering.
Absolutely. Localized based on the market nuances, based also on your business, because your vertical could be different to a different vertical. And then the third thing is you have different payment methods, different currencies, different parts of the country have different fraud profiles. So it's really, really important to work with a partner who can ensure that localized, tailored, bespoke approach on a global level.
Yeah, love it. Brilliant. So let's take a pause there and go to the halftime round. Quick fire with Dan, sitting at the back there.
Yeah, let's do it. That is very interesting and also terrifying in equal measure, that conversation. I don't think people quite appreciate the level of protection that is out there, saving them from various different things. Right, quick fire round. This is, well, what did you describe yourself at the start, or describe you as superhero, keeping people safe, something to those effects?
I didn't say that.
I said that, yeah. No, she's too modest.
Let's kind of get to know the person behind the superhero mask. I'm going to fire 1 to 6 questions at you. Very quick, very easy questions. Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Morning person or night owl?
Both. 100% both. I
like 24 hours.
I like to wake up at 5 a.m. I like to do my workout then. But equally, I will never shy away from a night out.
Yeah, good.
Nice. All rounder, excellent. Meeting or an email?
I'd say, firstly, I'm a massive fan of face-to-face. And we have an awesome office. So I love being in the office with the team. So I will always go and find someone if I cannot find them to ask them a question. But I hate meetings just for the sake of a meeting.
Yeah. Nice. Spreadsheet or whiteboard?
I would say neither.
For you. Push back. He needs to be pushed back too sometimes. Yeah.
I think I need to do some sort of Excel course to actually be able to work spreadsheets properly. And whiteboards have their time and place. I think I'm more of a bullet point kind of person.
Bullet points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Three bullet points.
3 bullet points, just short and sweet.
Short and sweet.
I'm really into dashboards at the moment, using Claude
Oh
to
my
create
gosh,
dashboards.
yes.
That's
Yes,
my
yes,
new
yes, yes.
passion
Yes.
project.
I love Claude dashboards, and I love the people who create them for me.
Yeah. I'll create one for you anytime.
Thanks, Shona.
May answer the next question. Data-driven or gut instinct?
I'm actually data-driven. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess in your line of work, you need to be, right?
Yeah,
It's
I'm
all
very
about
data.
the data.
I'm very data-driven. When it comes to people, I'm much more gut-driven. But when it comes to making business decisions, it's the data.
Nice. I like that answer. Yeah, different in different situations. Industry conference or company offsite?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I would say both, as long as Amal, who is our head of marketing, as long as she's there. Because one, I know it's going to be an excellent event, and two, it's always going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, what a nice shout out.
That's so nice.
I concur, because I've met Amal at a
Yes,
conference
yes.
at MP Berlin,
Right?
and she was absolutely lovely. Yeah. And it's a very nice booth. That was a great event. Thank you much.
Final one then for me. What do you enjoy most about your role?
Oh, 1,000 billion% the people. I have an amazing team. I have great colleagues. I love meeting our customers and our partners, for sure. The thing I personally love, apart from the fact we have an excellent product, etc., is the people.
Absolutely, and that's why we felt like you're such a personable person already. So, like, just the perfect guest for coming on the People Making Payments, because that's what we're all about, is just celebrating the people, sort of, behind the brands, and all of the hard work and that passion that goes into making payments and fraud and commerce. Just such a great place to work.
Thank you.
So, I now wanted to move on to the future of fraud and how it's sort of going to be going forward. We've looked back and talked about how it's changed, but what do you see as sort of the next frontier, let's say, of what you'll be tackling?
I think, firstly, speed and scale. Fraudsters, we're already seeing they're getting faster on a bigger scale. That's going to continue. So that is something that we need to be very aware of and always stay ahead of. The second thing, when we're talking about the future of fraud, is agentic commerce. I know, eye roll, everyone's talking about it. And there are more protocols than there are agentic transactions, but fine. The reality is, this is the direction things are moving in. And when you have a bot making a purchase, there is a whole different level of fraud screening that needs to be done, because the identity and intent is very different. And the things you need to look for and the things you need to identify are very different to a human making that transaction. So you want to know who is the person instructing the bot, as well as knowing, is this a trustworthy bot? So I think that is something that the industry needs to keep on top of. With PSD3, how does 3D Secure fit into that? How does SCA fit into that? That is something that has not been defined at all, and that needs to be defined. And Signifyd are involved with discussions in trying to see how we can shape and how we can define some of those regulations. I think for me, those are two big things, speed and scale, agentic commerce. And the third thing is friendly fraud is going to continue. And that is going to become much, much, much more in the forefront for retailers, for merchants, when they're looking at the true cost of what they would call fraud.
Yeah. Super interesting. I mean, and you meant with agentic, for example, you said eye roll, but I think from my perspective, more of the eye roll is towards the marketing hyperbole, sort of, flashy claims that sort of like are being made. But I think that a lot of actual interest in agentic right now, and a lot of the conversations I actually hear is around the fraud piece, right? It's actually like sort of how do we figure out like the fraud piece? How would we keep this safe? But then also, when something goes wrong in an agentic world, where does the accountability lie? What are the rules? What are the regulations? So, I think that is actually
I think
it's
that's
kind of like a sexy topic at the moment, is the whole fraud piece around
I
agentic.
think the fraud piece is so crucial because with PSD3, with SCA, immediately that means how can you even have agentic commerce? How can you have a bot buying something on your behalf? How can that happen in a region where there needs to be 3D secure and SCA? And I think we really need to solve that problem and future proof ourselves as well. And also we need to be honest about what we know and about what we don't know, because we don't know how this is going to evolve tomorrow. We can preempt things. We can make sure that we are flexible, that we don't have roadmaps for 2000 and never. We need to be able to pivot very, very quickly, which is why like tech-savvy, tech-forward companies like Signifyd are so ahead in this space, because one, we have things in place today, but two, we are constantly evolving and adapting and adjusting. And we're at the forefront of these discussions with the regulators about what this should look like, about how we can help shape these, keep these transactions safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose like in terms of, where we are with agentic right now, it's still fairly nascent, right? So a lot of the conversations are still like somewhat anticipating what it's going to be like, what's going to happen. Are you seeing like already like agentic transactions like taking place and sort of fraud happening as a result? Maybe it's not as nascent as I think it is.
So we see agentic transactions taking place. We have models and we have screening in place to ensure that those aren't fraudulent transactions, and we can very clearly identify an agentic commerce transaction versus a bot attack. We can very clearly distinguish between those. But as those agentic transactions increase, we need to have even stronger, even more sophisticated methods in place and build on what we have today.
Yeah, brilliant. And it sounds like a lot of that, again, is about sort of collaboration, working with regulators, making sure that you're anticipating and staying ahead of the game, essentially. Talk more a little bit about that in terms of what that involves and sort of what best practice in that respect means.
So it involves a couple of different things. So we're a global company, and from a regulation standpoint, the US is very different to Europe. So the US is where we see those transactions coming in, where you don't have the same level of regulatory or compliance requirements that you have in Europe. And then in Europe, it is when PSD2 came into place and when 3D Secure was mandatory, it was a real shift for companies like Signifyd, but also for merchants who had to change their integrations, upgrade their integrations to make sure that they had 3D Secure. It was also a change for consumers who had to. I remember before 3DS was mandatory, if you had 3DS switched on in Spain, your conversion rates would be 20%, because the Spanish population didn't know what this 3DS thing was, this redirect, and it was not liked over there at all. And then it became mandatory, and then you've got the technologies involved, and you don't have that friction. And I think what we are trying to make sure is that with agentic, we start at that place where there is no friction, rather than eventually get there when it's mandatory.
Interesting. And I guess it takes us back to that idea of sort of like having that global scale and visibility, but then really like a local perspective of what works and what doesn't. Like ultimately, it sounds like there's always that balance, right, of wanting transactions to be secure, but also not at the expense of
And
authorization
friction-free.
and
Yeah.
conversion and
Yeah.
friction and all
Yeah.
of that sort
Yeah.
of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it comes down to working with merchants, working with regulators, but also working with partners. You know, we work with partners to make sure that the agentic transactions that they're sending us, that we have all the data that we need to be able to accurately determine whether this is legit or not. We also work with issuers where we can pass that information to issuers, and it's got a seal from Signifyd. We say that this is a genuine transaction, and then the issuer is happy to accept that transaction. So it isn't just we work with the merchant, it's working with all the different players in this ecosystem, from consumer to issuer.
And it sounds as though as well, like then that's sort of like the value of having, Signifyds in the market, in the sense that it sounds like quite a big undertaking in terms of that sort of like that again, we're going back to the network piece, but being able to draw upon that network of issuers, acquirers, partners, regulators, merchants. That's not necessarily that one payment company can do alone, right?
Exactly.
And then that's, I guess, this why there's sort of that importance of having players like yourself in the ecosystem that can really double down on that and specialize on that when it is such a important sort of like topic.
It really is. Payment providers are excellent at payment processing, at local acquiring, at being able to facilitate those payments. We specialize in fraud prevention. We specialize in screening transactions, making sure that they're genuine, making sure this is a good shopper. And it's not about blocking transactions. It's about unlocking transactions. It's about increasing revenue, and the customers that we have, the businesses that we work with that are extremely successful in this, in working with us and in being very forward thinking, are the ones who don't see it as a cost. They see it as a revenue generator.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that. So it's not about blocking, it's about unlocking. That's a really nice way of putting it. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so to kind of bring this all down into something really practical, what would be your advice for merchants to kind of keep their commerce safe?
Firstly, get visibility. You can't manage what you can't measure. Check your approval rates versus your conversion rates versus your success rates or authorization rates. Make sure you keep on top of that regularly. And if you need to get a second opinion, that is what Signifyd can help with. We can take a look at your data and find where there is room for improvement.
Lovely, brilliant. And I think that's a really nice sort of practical next step to take away. So to wrap up then, we're going to take it back more to the sort of the personal line of questioning, let's say. And I'm always fascinated to know if you hadn't kind of been doing what you're doing now in a parallel universe, what would Nikhita be doing?
I would be a writer. So my first career was as a journalist. So for 10 years, I was a journalist, specifically a tabloid journalist. And then I was the showbiz editor for a magazine. So I think if I was not working in what I'm working today, I would be a writer.
Oh, that's so interesting. And do you still do it as a hobby, even though it's not professional anymore?
I still love celebrity gossip as a hobby. Yeah, I do.
So more of a reader and a consumer.
Yeah,
than a
exactly.
writer.
I love the goss.
Yeah, good. And final question: if someone were to ask you, what is your like proudest achievement that wouldn't appear on your LinkedIn page? What is it?
I think probably raising kids that are kind. I think that is what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this day and age, cannot be valued enough, right? Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Nikhita. It's been an absolute pleasure.